Let's begin reading. From the first medicine treatises in 10,000, exempt pre-communist, to 1949, medical works listed in the 1991 National Chinese Medicine Union Catalog, we can trace a rich and diverse medicine culture in China, from well before the beginning of imperial history. There are naturalistic theories of health and disease based upon ideas about man's relationship with the heavens and earth. Equally, for most of the past 2,000 years, Chinese scholarly medical traditions have regarded the human body as vulnerable to inference by ancestors, demons, and spirits. Before the 2nd or 3rd centuries, medical works were generally not attributed. Thank you, A42, for joining us in the live stream tonight. We are on the 60th Wonder of China. We got our last 10 coming up. It'll probably be like one more week and then we're done with this book. Inscriptions on a cow scalpel and the diviner's record of the king's illness, determining which spirit ancestor was to be prepared for a cure. The first complete medical treatises were set down in the late Warring States period, and some survive as monumental scrolls excavated from the 2nd century BC tombs. Much of the central work that describes the classical medical principles of yin-yang Wu Jing and the Wu Jing of wood, fire, wood, metal, water, and the Yellow River corpus, 3 complications first assembled in the centuries, around the turn of the millennia, and arranged in the form of a dialogue between the Yellow Emperor himself, represented as a patron of natural philosophy, and his ministers often Bo, a specialist in acupuncture and other essentials, as a patron of natural philosophy, and his ministers often Kubo, specialist in matters of Li Gong and the Thunder Duke. Responsible for punishments, law, and the calendar, the emperor had a role in the divination and divining of the seasons. Welcome to the live stream. I'm glad you could join us tonight. And it is these skills that linked him with the essential medical arts, the knowledge of the body's relationship with the cycles and phases of nature, and the accurate prediction of the progress of disease. It is in the Yellow Emperor's inner canon that we find the body divided into 12 distinct channels, through which qi was thought to move rhythmically around the body. The channels surfaced in from the pulse at places where ancient Chinese physicians could examine the condition of the body's qi, and the organs through which the body qi and the organs through which it flowed. A large number of pulse types were distinguished, such as floating, superficial, sunken, and hesitant. This form of diagnostics became the preeminent method for elite physicians throughout imperial China, and remains so today for the modern practitioners of traditional Chinese medicine. Welcome 533, I'm glad you could join us tonight. Welcome So-Called Bash. I hope you enjoy the 60th Wonder of China medicine. We have really only a few more of these readings, since we are on the last 10, and we're just going back and forth between this book and the Civil War book. So, a belief of the empirical spirit of Chinese medicine that knowledge of the virtues of food and drugs comes through trial and error is enshrined in the Han legend of the Red Emperor, also known as Shenggong, the divine farmer, who is said to have led humanity out of a state of hunting and savagery, away from eating raw flesh, drinking blood, and wearing skins, toward agricultural utopia. Welcome, Queenie Wong, and yes, this is medicine. We are on the top right side of the page. It's a little difficult to read, but stories about the divine farmer describe how he thrashed and tasted all plants so that they revealed their essential flavors, and smells so that he could throw their medical protections, and how he classified the plants, separating which were fit for consumption and which were fit for healing. Calling upon the tradition of the empirical testing, his name was evoked in the title of a number of famous material medica, beginning with the Shengnong Benka Jing. Drug and prescription literature went through a rapid expansion under imperial sponsorship in the northern Song dynasty. By the 16th century, Li Jing's monumental Bicao Gong Mu recorded 1,898 drugs and 11,096 prescriptions. Welcome, No Fairy. I'm glad you could join us tonight for medicines. We are on the last bold section, Chinese medicine as propaganda. In 1958, Chairman Mao's famous statement with which we will open this entry ushered in a new era of national pride in the wonder of the Chinese medicine. This popular slogan encouraged biomedical doctors to value traditional Chinese medicine and work toward uniting modern and ancient medicine for the greater benefit of mankind. But what did Mao really mean? Welcome back, 524. I'm glad you could join us tonight. And welcome to anyone who pops up on YouTube. Mao's investment in traditional medicine was something of a paradox, despite his suspicion of religion and folk belief, and the basic faith in the value of modern science. He encouraged traditional healers to support the Chinese Communist Party, especially during the Long March and the subsequent Yingning years, or Golden Age of communism. After all, there was very little of any kind of medicine available to serve the people at that time. Mao also expressed a suspicion of political sympathies of foreign-trained experts, including medical doctors. The nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek had been keen supporters of modernizing. Welcome to the live stream. I'm glad you could join us tonight. We are currently looking at medicine, and we will go over it in the near future. So let's begin right below the black and white picture. Medicine, Mao's defense of ingenious healers, was consciously patriotic. He initiated a series of successful campaigns to raise the status of traditional medicine. According to a World Health Organization estimates, traditional medicine in 2002 still accounted for about 40% of Chinese healthcare, excluding the persuasive and enduring Chinese medical culture known as Yangxing. The sum of those everyday practices aimed at bodily cultivation, such as nutrition, exercise, meditation, and massage, that constitute the prevention aspect of traditional Chinese healing arts. Mao's eulogy of traditional medicine was probably meant to stimulate modern research and development of traditional medical skills. There was a great pride in the international impact of some of these more radical procedures. It did not go unnoticed. For example, that one iconic image of China in the 1970s came from the television coverage of a brain operation performed with the patient conscious and chatting under local acupuncture, anesthetic, anesthesia being a relatively modern invention. Welcome, CAO Sebastian. I'm glad you could join us tonight for medicine. Deep surgery is not a notable theory of pre-modern Chinese medicine, and if Mao was here today, he would have been impressed by the global distribution of the well-known traditional herb, Qinghao. Reinvented as modern prophylactic and a cure for malaria, traditional medicine, in Mao's view, could be stripped of superstition and pseudoscience and mined for those elements that would bear up to modern scientific scrutiny. Oh, so eulogy basically means that think of it like an encore, or eulogy as in like legacy or something. Let me just look at, I'm going to bring up a direct definition of that on my screen over here. Um, what it specifically means is, one second, a speech or piece of writing that has praises someone or something highly, typically someone who has just died. So, in the case of Mao's eulogy, it was a praise of his medical work during his life. So, like if you were at a funeral and you were to give a eulogy, you would be giving the eulogy for the person who just died. Alright, cool. It's always good to learn new vocabulary, so if anyone has any questions about the vocabulary in the text, I can tell you what I know, and I also have a computer right next to me for more defining. In China, today most medical practitioners have some training in biomedical and traditional medicine. Varying degrees of integration, welcome building, are evident institutionally in the delivery of healthcare at hospitals, in diagnostics, explanatory methods of disease, therapeutic paths, and drug preparations. Some ingenious traditions, such as pharmacotherapy, acupuncture, mytobustion, uh, and massage, are on offer in modern hospital and clinical settings, and even on emergency wards. Other traditions are a living part of popular medicine knowledge. Elderly people gather in parks to practice Tai Chi, the slow, gentle martial art that moves Qi and strengthens the spirit. They pass on the assumptions that dietary care and high tide of a global powerful biomedicine that extremely lubricant trade in prepared Chinese medicines worldwide testifies to a two-way transfer of knowledge. With mass immigration and the globalization of plurality of medical traditions, Chinese medicine now survives in many different forms, transforming as it comes into contact with different cultures around the world. Alright, so we got a couple pictures that we can look at here. At the bottom, right here, this is a acupuncture procedure. There's actually quite a few acupuncturists in the United States. You can find one in nearly every major city and town. There actually is one in our town. I've never been to it, but if anyone's done acupuncture, go ahead and say in the comments below. At the top here is a street medicine man attending to a patient's foot at a Beijing doorway. On the page previous, right here we got a Chinese medicine store. It very much looks like a modern pharmacy, with the exception of jars of different herbs and liquids rather than pills. Over here is an ivory statue of the Divine Farmer. And up in this corner, we have a 19th century painting of a male figure with labeled acupuncture points. Welcome, Angela's son. I'm glad you could join us tonight. I had some weird connection problems for the first few minutes, but we got past it. We had to restart our phone, so let's go back to our reading here. Where did I go? Right there. Okay. The decimal system has a great advantage of expressing numbers in a simple, consistent way, making it easy to understand their relationships. It is a piece of cloth 9 3/16 inches long, inches long shorter or longer than 1/4 yard long. Wow, that was a tongue twister. Answering that question is more difficult than comparing 9.19 and 9.00 inches. But the system that permits such uncomplicated comparisons is not simple. It involves a number of any size expressing use digits 0 to 9 or their equivalent, a place value, add each to its digit a number standing for the power of 10, positive or negative, the use of a symbol to separate positive and negative powers of 10. The system did not exist until the late 16th century. China played an important part in its prehistory. The Greeks all used letters of their alphabet to write numbers. The Romans used a few letters to stand for 1, 5, 10, 50, 100, 500, etc. The Chinese, in a much older written records from 1450 BC, were much closer to the decimal system for whole numbers, with separate signs for the digits 1 to 9 and other symbols for special purposes. But the digits and decimal numbers were standing for record quantities. By roughly 2,000 years ago, the Chinese had added a sign for 100,000 and could write much larger numbers by combining the signs they had. They wrote 1,000,000,000, a number Westerners did not use until early modern times, by putting together symbols for 100,000 and 10,000. This natural move combined a number and a sign for a decimal place, just as 500 amounts by multiplying 5 and 10, 100. The Chinese grouped large numbers by 4s instead of 3s. Thus they wrote a trillion as not 1 trillion, but 1,000 million? Wow, that's a tongue twister. Welcome JC, welcome Assassin EA. I'm learning about the early decimal system right now in China, so 10,000, 10,000, 10,000s. Then 5 trillion 378 240 901 became simply 500. Oh. 500 500 thousands, 3 10,000s, 7,000s, 800s, 2 10s, 4 10,000s, 900s, 1. Whew, that's a tongue twister. In everyday measuring, details of notation varied, but mathematicians and astronomers were on the whole consistently. The Chinese used a character meaning parts to express numbers less than 1. They wrote 4349 as of 49 parts 43. Up to the 13th century, each of many astronomical systems used by the government to generate predictions had its own way of writing fractions. One important average interval between the new moons was 29, 43, 81 days for another 29, 499, 940 days. Both are close approximations to the modern value 29.53059 days. The high point of the tradition, the astronomical system of 1280, began using decimal fractions for every number. The length of the year was 300, 6 tenths, 5 2 tenths, 4 hundredths, 2 thousandths, 5 10,000ths, that is 365.2425, the same length used for today's calendar. That actually seems a lot weirder. The system used only for recording did not need a special symbol for 0. For calculations, mathematicians in China used simple computing devices. Through most of history, they depended on sets of little rods laid out in a grid, actual or imagined. They represented the numbers 1 to 5 by laying down as many rods vertically or horizontally rod stood for 5, and one with the 2 vertical rods below it for 7. Welcome Jolly EC8, and welcome E27 and Julie11. I'm glad you could join us tonight. They set out the numbers 10 to 90 in the next square of the grid to the left. To avoid confusing it with the square that contained 1s, they used horizontal rods for 1 to 4, a vertical one for 5, and so on. Alternating these arrangements, they arranged rods for hundreds, like those for 1s, those for thousands, and those for 10s, and so on. When settling out the equation equivalent of 608, it was natural to leave the space for 10s empty. From the 7th century on, when recording computations, mathematicians put a dot in the empty spaces to avoid miscopying. By the 13th century, this sign became 0 like circle. The 0 originated earlier in India or Southeast Asia, and China moved probably resulted from foreign influence. Out of the 3 characteristics of the decimal system, we can conclude that the Chinese used the equivalent digits of 1 to 9 in writing numbers. But they relied on words to identify different decimal places. Their number system combined with those of India and the Muslim world, and transmitted to Europe, eased the way toward a mature decimal system of the late 16th century. Right here is a late 17th century brass and iron hand calculator with paper counting rods. Just above that, a woman is using an Accubus to calculate the sums. You can also see a calculator next door. So, welcome Albaba. I'm glad you could join us for the decimal system. And here's another Accubus. In its, design used for centuries. The number on this is 7,230,189. Alright, so I'm going to have to learn how to use one of these Accubuses. Alright, so, jeez, fun day. Annie Gu, welcome to the live stream. I'm glad you could join us tonight. Let's just put up our next section here. Alright. The history of the magnetic compass has its roots in the geomatic lore of ancient times. The pre-modern Chinese geomancy signified the art of Feng Shui, in which the houses of the living and the tombs of the dead were positioned in harmony with the currents of the so-called cosmic breath. Winds and waters not only refer to the physical phenomena, but also to that invisible stream of energetic qi, thought to circulate in the veins and vessels of microcosm, as we know. Magnetism, the underlying principle of the compass, is believed to form part of this complex ideas. Welcome 401610 and welcome Judy. I'm glad you could join us tonight for the compass and navigation. Already before the Han Dynasty, books appeared in which references were made to the magnetism of certain stones, and by that time a device existed which may be considered the predecessor of the later compass. This diviner's board consisted of 2 superposed plates. One was square-shaped, symbolizing Earth, and was engraved with the names of the 28 equatorial divisions or constellations and the 8 chief trigrams. The upper board was round, stood for heaven, and showed the 24 compass points, which would give rise to the later Chinese compass card. Welcome Alex Go. I'm glad you could join us tonight for the compass. In the center was drawn the Big Dipper, a stable northern constellation. Later on, the upper board appears to have been replaced by a spoon made of magnetic lodestone. A tool was modeled after the Big Dipper and was placed at the center whereby the handle indicated directly. Welcome to anyone on YouTube. Feel free to do as you want. Comment as you please on the live stream. The transition from the use of the spoon to that of the needle probably must have happened somewhere around the 4th century AD. The first to make a description of a magnetic needle was the alchemist Ji Hong, and it is generally assumed that by the 9th century the compass had developed into its definite form. As early as the 11th century, in the work of the Song dynasty, I will be making a translation of the script after the live stream, so stay tuned for that. Welcome, Strive Forward. I'm glad you could join us tonight. This is the compass and navigation of junks. Feel free to comment anything in the comments that need be commented. And I will be making a translation of the text after our live stream. Astronomer, engineer, and the high official Xing Gong, welcome 1994. I'm glad you could join us. The earliest complete and clear description of the magnetic needle compass can be found. This is roughly 100 years before the first mentions of the compass in European and Arabic sources. Xing Gong's reference to north and south pointing needles reflects basic understanding of magnetic polarity. Welcome, Lawrence Joe. I'm glad you could join us tonight. In the Song dynasty, several types of compasses existed. When weather circumstances hindered the use of celestial bodies from orientation, armies used a basin of water in which a small wooden fish containing a filling of lodestone was set afloat. The attached needle, fixed with wax, thus indicated the southern direction. A small dry variant consisting of a little wooden turtle that, equipped with a needle, functioned as an indicator. This object was struck on the pin, which in itself rotated on the board. Later, the needle, magnetized with the lodestone, simply replaced the fish and turtle. In the wake of these evolutions, the Chinese also became aware of the fact that the compass needle did not point to the geographic poles, but to the magnetic poles, the so-called magnetic declination. Welcome, Chance. I'm glad you could join us tonight. And welcome back, 1994. The ultimate evolution of the magnetic compass was the application of the device aboard a ship. It was during the Song dynasty, characterized by intense magnification, that the son of the port official Zhong Yong, in his work entitled Bingzhou Geitang from 1117, gave a detailed description of the uses of a needle compass by Chinese mariners. Welcome, Gord. 1 second. Alright. I'll be with you in 1 second. I'll answer your questions shortly. Get out of here. Okay. Okay, so before the mention, try this again. Right, I'll be back with your questions shortly. Alright. So teacher Zhong Yu, I'm not actually sure where he... Ah, fuck, really? Bastard. Alright, sorry about that. So, teacher Zhong Yu basically was in a port city when he was developing the system and writing his book. So, that's what I can say about that. And let's move on to the next page. This will be our last page for tonight. These are actually fairly short sections. From the 11th century, Chinese sailors were thought to have possessed some of the most cross-staff in which the altitude of stars could be measured, important in reckoning positions, measuring latitudes from few problems, and the same could be said for longitude. While the European seafaring and determination of the longitudinal position of a ship continued to be a major problem until the invention of an accurate timekeeper by John Harrison in the 18th century, the Chinese managed to solve the problem long before this by means of burning incense sticks for measuring watches. The heyday of Chinese ocean-going voyages took place between 1405 and 1433, when the Ming emperors Yongle and Xingdi launched a total of 7 gigantic expeditions of diplomacy. These involved a stunning 27,000 crews of hundreds of ships, all to major places around the eastern and western Indian Ocean. Welcome Aya Kong to the live stream. I'm glad you could join us tonight. Stretching as far as the East African shores. During these impressive voyages, the Chinese had the best nautical technology at their disposal. The ships themselves were a product of the age of old development of experience in shipbuilding materialized in huge junks. And sailing equipment included very typical oars, rudders and anchors. The state-shaped lug sails made mats of bamboo battens, and formidable inventions such as the division of the hull into watertight compartments in order to prevent shipwreck. Welcome now, B-52. I'm glad you could join us. Moreover, the Chinese Admiral Jing He's fleet and gunnery and the whole array of incendiary weapons. Welcome, Helen 33. I'm glad you could join us tonight. Let's see. On board, special cabin was installed for the Huozhang, or compass watcher. During the Jing He's expeditions, sea charts were drawn of all regions that were visited by the fleet, showing a detailed picture of coastal landmarks and compass routes. A number of navigational diagrams have also survived, which indicate the stars that have to be followed by junks. Both charts and diagrams were included in the 1628 military work Wubei Xiu by the encyclopedist Mao Yangyi. Welcome, Goli. I'm glad you could join us tonight. And are among the most important accomplishments of pre-modern Chinese navigation. Nowadays, the traditional compass has been replaced by more advanced versions such as the electrically powered gyro compass, and the positioning is maintained reckoned by means of satellite. The age of wooden vessel has long since gone, but with Shanghai as the largest port in the world, China has become a major player in maritime transportation. So, for 2 days later, we will be doing the topic of bridges. But let's look at 2 pictures real quick. This is a navigational diagram drawn during Jing He's expedition in the early Ming Dynasty. Welcome, Claire, ADF. I'm glad you could join us tonight. So, and right up here is Zhong He's nautical charts as part of his military work, Wubei Ji. This is showing landmarks of China's southeast coast, and the dotted lines represent the sailing routes. Our next picture right here is the close-up of a construction compass by traditional methods. Just up here is basically a depiction, a drawing of the Chinese junk, the first water-type ships in the world. And right here is our fish compass, which was used to point south rather than north. On our last page is the spoon compass, which points north. Welcome, Mimis. I'm glad you could join us tonight. Let's see. We're going to flip this around. So I hope everyone's enjoying their time on the live streams tonight. We had a small technical problem at the beginning, but it was easily solved. Let me just see. Our next three sections are gunpowder, the art of war, and bridges. Now, bridges in the next section are not typically the most exciting topic, but the one thing I can note about Chinese bridges that didn't exist in European bridges till much later on would be the fact that, thank you for the donation, is the fact that Chinese bridges did not use Roman arches, a ton of Roman arches in order to be constructed. For example, in the picture for 2 days later, we got this bridge that's constructed in a singular arch, and just over here is another bridge, a picture of a bridge with a huge singular arc, which is much better for boat travel than would be like Roman bridges. So that's what I can say about bridge design. And in fact, actually, right here's a single stone structure bridge. You can see right here that there's a little bit built underneath the stones themselves to support the bridge above, so that the bridge itself doesn't sink down or collapse into the river as quickly. So there's like a little foundation below. And after that is the art of war. So in 2 days we're going to do, we might do an art of war, we might do a quick art of war reading or somewhat. I actually got the art of war on my iPad for free, and I've read 1 or 2 of the sections, and it's actually pretty interesting and applies to pretty much a lot of things. Welcome, Queen 20E. I'm glad you could join us tonight. It's the last 8 minutes of the live stream, and I'm just describing what's going to happen 2 days later. So the art of war describes things like the use of crossbows, the use of chariots/cavalry, and also the use of shock and scare tactics. But this book basically glosses over the art of war, so I might do a separate live stream just on the art of war, so that we can look at that. But the section on gunpowder is fairly thin as well, but I see it actually has a few things in here. For example, the section of gunpowder, this picture is very famous, where you see the archer in the distance, and being thrown on said archer from the horseman is a grenade, an early version of a grenade. Just up here are early flamethrowers. They're called fire lances, but same idea. The gunpowder produces enough of a force to create flames that burst out of them. And of course, gunpowder was first used for fireworks, but was discovered in an alchemy accident, so that must have been a misfortune, a very big misfortune when that occurred. Suffice to say, we have fireworks and other stuff because of gunpowder. Go chemistry. Any chemists in the room, you'll have fun with that. Let's see. So, we're definitely going to skip, probably only going to do the 1 in 2 days, and then we're going to skip over to our last few sections, just to finish up our live stream. We might actually, I might actually just not read what's in this book for the Hong Kong and Manchu section and the Taiwan section. I might just stop the book after the next live stream of said book. So this is the second to last 70 Wonders live stream, and the last live stream will basically go through a few of the items, and will include. I'll actually probably. Let's see. Actually, the history of tea section looks like it covers a good chunk from the Song and Ming, so we might just read that and skip the everyday objects section. So, to everyone who came, I'm glad you came to the live stream. It's a good time to come to the live stream. Tomorrow we're going back to our Civil War book, and we'll welcome A2A. Tomorrow we'll go back to our Civil War book. We'll read a little bit more of General Grant's memoir, Chapter 2, which is this right here. I'm typing it down. So, we're looking at that particular battle that General Grant was specifically writing his memoir on. So, I hope you guys will enjoy that tomorrow. If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to post them. I'll be putting together a Chinese translation for the text that we read tonight, and hopefully post them in the moments before everyone's gone. So that's all I have to say about that. I've got 4 minutes left, so Q&A. How's everyone's day going? Mine was a little bit long and stressful. I just had a couple things pop up that basically shut down my day for a couple minutes. What about you guys? Let's see. I mean, actually, an interesting fact about junks. The Chinese junk back in the 18th century welcomed Renigold V. I'm glad you could join us tonight. Interesting thing, so there was a boat race, there was a lot of boat racing in the 19th century, and a Chinese junk actually made the world record for crossing the Pacific Ocean in the 19th century, which is actually very impressive. So, Chinese junks are actually some of the most well-built ships, especially the smaller ones, are very much well-built and can travel basically anywhere and take on damage in any part of the hull. Welcome, Mr. Yang. I'm glad you could join us for the last 2 minutes. So yeah, no, that's an interesting fact about junks. One junk actually broke the record in the 19th century of the world's fastest ship sail to from China to California, I believe. So yeah, that was actually kind of interesting. Another interesting thing about seafaring is that it was quicker to go from China to California than it was to go from California to the eastern United States. Because, at least into the California Gold Rush and before the Panama Canal, because going from China to California was basically a straight across the Pacific Ocean, whereas when you sailed from, let's say, New York to San Francisco, you would take a longer route going down across South America and into San Francisco, especially prior to the Panama Canal and prior to faster steamboat technology. Now, granted, nowadays the Panama Canal exists and has existed for the past 120 years or so, which has changed seafaring in the Western Hemisphere a lot. So we have one last minute. Tomorrow in 24 hours is the second chapter of General Grant's memoir, and I hope to see you all there. And in 2 days will be the second to last, if not the last, section in the 70 Wonders of China. Have a good night, and have a good day. And to all YouTube commenters who pop up later on, I hope you all have a good day and a good night. I'm just going to shut down here and enjoy.